wanted to hit on a recruiting update tonight. Obviously, there is a lot going on the recruiting trail, not only for the Clemson Tigers, but all the teams out there in college football. It's in the heat of recruitment season. It's in the heat of official visit weekends, and everybody's locking in recruits here and there. And we did a show last week, Jordan, and we didn't get to talk about one of our biggest commits because he didn't commit until after we were done with the show, and we didn't get a chance to talk to him. And that is Carter Scruggs, offensive lineman, adding to a already massive haul from our very own Matt Luke, offensive line coach for the Clemson Tigers. And just give us a little rundown on Carter Scruggs and what this commitment means for the Tigers. I think we are completely done now at offensive line. We're not going to take any further commitments at offensive line, but this is quite a haul that Matt Luke has put together. And just give us some notes and some highlights from Carter Scruggs and what Clemson fans could be expecting from landing a recruit such as him.
Yeah, I mean, Carter Scruggs is a guy that, Clemson has been, really in on for quite some time. From Loudoun County, Virginia, Clemson has done a really good job as of late in Virginia in recent cycles. And this is just another example. Carter Scruggs is a guy that I think could play tackle, but I think he's definitely projects more to play on the inside. And he's just been dominating the camp circuit as of late. His stock has continued to rise. He's now a top 200 player, or like top 150 player, I should say. It just adds to another piece to what's arguably the best offensive line class in the country right now. If you look at just the quality and the quantity of players that Clemson has. I mean, maybe USC might have an argument, but beyond that, I mean, I don't see another program in the country that has as impressive of a offensive line haul as Clemson does right now. And Carter Scruggs is, he wanted to jump in the boat. There was one spot left, and that was, that was the kind of the sign there. And he kind of had always felt like Clemson was going to be the choice, and he said, why keep taking visits and all that? Let me go ahead and secure my spot. So, really, really excited for this group and what their potential is. And I think the coolest thing about what this class has been is that you've basically landed everybody that you prioritized. I mean, when you think of the guys that you've landed, the Adam Guthries, the Grant Wises, of course, Carter Scruggs, Chance Barkley, like these are guys that Clemson thought really highly of, and they were their first choices on the board, and they went and got them. That hasn't always been the case with Clemson and offensive line recruiting. You've had your star-studded guys, here and there, but a Blake Miller, Tristan Lay was a 5-star coming out, but those were few and far between. And even the highly rated guys that you were going after, you were missing on. You were having to go deeper into your board to fill out your class. But that's not the case this time. You had to tell a kid like Cannon Pickett, who just committed to Miami the other day, I believe yesterday. He couldn't commit to you because you right. took. Yeah, I mean, you filled up and you got the guys that you wanted. And I like Cannon Pickett. Another guy, Fletcher Turk is a guy that we've talked about it a little bit over the past couple of weeks. Clemson really liked him. Dalton Toothman, like you had some really high caliber players, Akene Ogboko, like that were on campus for that official visit weekend. That you filled up and you got the guys that you wanted. So that's. Right. I think that's the most incredible thing about what Matt Luke has meant for this offensive line and their recruiting efforts.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of saw him kind of widen the net at one point in time in the recruiting process, and come to find out he didn't need to, right? And you mentioned a lot of those guys that Clemson would have been lucky to have commit to, become Tigers, and we just kind of hit on all the guys that we prioritized at the front of the class, and that's something that I don't know if is getting a lot of talk out there, is getting a lot of respect out there. But it's not been the norm at Clemson. This is a new version of recruiting level for the offensive line position at Clemson University. This has long been something that me and you have talked about, not only on the air but off the air, about how we hoped that Clemson offensive line would develop into. And Matt Luke has come on board, and in his first 2 years, he has absolutely knocked it out of the park. Not only with developing the players that are on the roster, but you talk about the guys that he's recruiting, the guys that he's getting on campus. Clemson would not have gotten on campus before Matt Luke was the offensive line coach here. And I think that's important to realize. And, we talked about it last week, but, the two highest rated recruits in our class currently, a top 5 class currently, mind you, are 2 offensive linemen. And that's not something that Clemson has been able to say in the Dabo Sweeney era. It's been the one position group that I think can be criticized with not being recruited at a high enough level, and that clearly has changed for the better for the Clemson Tigers. And I cannot wait to see the offensive lines that Matt Luke is going to produce as the Clemson offensive line coach. I hope we can keep him forever. I don't know if we'll be able to, but we're going to enjoy the ride while he's here, because this is uncommon recruiting for Clemson at the offensive line position. So, my sentiment out there to Clemson fans is enjoy it while it lasts, because we may not have Matt Luke forever, but you better enjoy it while it lasts, because this is elite level offensive line recruiting and development.
Yeah, 100%. And it's kind of trickled into kind of how Clemson has gone about doing things at other positions. I'm going to talk about the safety position in a little bit, but what you've done at that position already is almost as impressive. And you already have guys like Polo Anderson and Caden Gebhardt in the boat, and you're still very much in it for a few more highly rated guys, Joey O'Brien, Blake Stewart, like. You're starting to see them expand the board and go after the higher caliber guys at positions that Clemson traditionally has not recruited the highest. I mean, honestly, the 2 positions that you could probably say over the Dabo Sweeney tenure that they have not recruited the best at in terms of like star talent is offensive line and safety. And I think you've had better success at safety, because I think you've had some good takes, good development there. But still, like, the guys that you're seeing win national championships, the programs that are winning national championships, they are able to land high caliber safety prospects, and I think that it's a luxury to have. You're not getting like a Caleb Downs, but getting a top 100 guy every once in a while is pretty nice. I mean, and you've done that, and you saw what Andrew Makuba was, for Texas after he left. I mean. You don't get many guys like that.
Right.
So, you got to Clemson has made a much better effort, I think. And I think they're, from an NIL standpoint, they are in a much better position to make that a more attractive part of their recruiting efforts too. So.
Yeah. I think you make a good point there. It's, Clemson has righted some of the wrongs that contributed to the mass amount of decommits that we saw last cycle, and that was, what I hope to be an anomaly for a Clemson class. I think it was an anomaly, and I think that will prove out as time goes on, because I think they've corrected some of that stuff when you talk about the NIL and the collectives and how they approach new age recruiting, if you will. Like, this is a completely different era of college football, and Clemson. They went through a bit of a rough patch, and that was very evident in last year's recruiting cycle about not being able to hold on to some of the top recruits in their class. We saw 6 to 7 guys decommit, and they were high level guys, and it hurt last recruiting cycle. But they have rebounded nicely. You can see that Dabo Sweeney stressed to the staff, especially this recruiting cycle, how important it was. The NIL collectives got on board. Graham Neff, the athletic director, kind of got on board with allowing points and things like that. the same points that you would get for recruiting or for contributing to IPTE, you would get for contributing to, the NIL collective as well. So, I think they got kind of a bit more of a grasp at it at all levels of Clemson athletics right now when it comes to football recruiting, the NIL space, and all of that stuff. So let's go ahead and turn the page. We talked about Carter Scruggs and how exciting it is to have him on board and the recruiting class that Matt Luke has brought on the offensive line. But that's not all the exciting news that's going on with Clemson football and recruiting. We got a lot of iron still in the fire, Jordan. We got a lot of players, a lot of big name guys that are still out there on the board that Clemson is in really good position with. So tell us what's going on with recruiting. We got 18 recruits in this recruiting class so far. It's a top 5 class right now as it sits. Will it finish a top 5 class? Probably not. But we got a lot of great players. Tell us about the guys that are uncommitted that Clemson is still in a really good position with, and position groups that we are still in the hunt for, a couple more commits.
Yeah, you're still waiting on movement on the defensive front, defensive line, defensive end, linebacker. Starting with the defensive line, you have guys and irons in the fire like Bryce Perry White and Dre Quinn. Those are the priorities. Bryce Perry White is a guy that some view as a defensive end, a lot of others view as a defensive tackle. Clemson is kind of pitching both ways to him. You can come here and play either or, and so they with the defensive end numbers in particular, they would be willing to consider Bryce Perry White a take at defensive end. And he's continued to take his visits. I've talked about it before. He has the family connections to Clemson. He's the cousin of Armand Mason, and he's also Grady Jarrett is also his uncle, I believe. So you have that. You have the familial connections to Clemson. He's been to Clemson more than any other school. Right now he's continuing to take his official visits, but Clemson, from what I understand, still feels really good about where they stand with him. And I think it's one of those things where you just gotta hold the course, hold steady, and you should be the pick at the end. But crazier things have happened, and the programs he is visiting certainly have their ways of being persuasive. He was just at Miami this past weekend. From what I understand, he had a really nice time. And Miami, is pushing really hard for him. He is a priority for them. So something to watch. I think he'll be at Texas A&M this coming weekend. So this is you got to continue to remind him of why Clemson is the pick. Everything that he would have going for him if he were to pick Clemson, all the connections that are already there, and all of that. And then with Dre Quinn, I think he got a prediction today on 24/7 Sports for Clemson. Always a good sign. But he's also going to continue to take his visits. But I think if you're able to land both of these guys, I mean, obviously the complexion of the defensive line class looks a lot different than even a month ago. I mean, you got a guy like Cameron Cody who we all really like, but one guy does not make a defensive line class. But you transform that with a 5-star talent like Bryce Perry White, a top 100 player like Dre Quinn, and then all of a sudden, you have a pretty formidable defensive line class already, even if it's not like the quantity that you've seen in previous cycles. So continuing to keep an eye on them. I already mentioned safety. Joey O'Brien and Blake Stewart are guys that Clemson is still pushing hard for. I don't think they would tell either one of them no if they both wanted to commit. So if you do take 4 safeties, I think that's something Clemson would be willing to do. Joey O'Brien is just coming off his visit to Oregon. From what I understand, had a really good time there. But I kind of see this as a Clemson. it's not really clear right now, but I see it as a Clemson, Notre Dame, Penn State race. Somebody has the lead. Who knows? I don't know. He's kind of Joey seems to be a kid that's kind of impressionable. So he's gonna say really really good things and be really really high on whoever he just recently visited. But I do think Clemson is legitimately in contention and could land his commitment. But I do think that Penn State and Notre Dame also have very very strong chances as well. And he visits Notre Dame last and pushed that official visit up from, I believe it was originally scheduled for June 20th, but then that was also the day he announced his commitment. So they moved it up to June 13th to make sure that he got in and saw Notre Dame. So I don't think that's insignificant either. With Blake Stewart, Miami has been the team that has been on him the longest and the team that's been the perceived favorite. But over that official visit weekend did move the needle for him at Clemson. So it's one of those things where I think you just got to see what happens. I think Blake I think you've certainly entered that top tier contender discussion for him as well. So if you can land, I mean, landing one of them would be great, but landing both, that's now we're talking, best safety class in the country. So that's something to consider as well. And then, of course, the biggest name left on the board, linebacker Tyler Atkinson. Putting all your chips in on him. You've dedicated a ton of resources, recruiting efforts into him. He's continuing to take his visits. He was also at Oregon with Joey O'Brien. I don't think that's insignificant. And this, it's nice to have two guys, that were there for that official visit weekend, and continuing to build that relationship. And maybe they were talking, maybe when they were at Oregon, they were talking about Clemson too. So that's not the worst thing in the world. He just announced today that he's going to be in Georgia, at Georgia this weekend. Certainly the program that I think everybody, if you're a Clemson fan, you're keeping the closest eye on, because that's the guy that you're going to continue to worry about, the program that you're going to continue to worry about when it comes to those Georgia recruits, obviously. So we'll see how that goes. It was delusional if anybody thought that, after the official visit weekend, Tyler Atkinson was going to shut down his recruitment and commit and jump in the boat. That's not how that's not how I viewed his recruitment. But I do still think Clemson will be in contention when it's all said and done. So just got to keep chipping away.
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely. Look, lots of iron still in the fire for Clemson football. Lots of recruiting left to do. And again, all these guys that we have verbal commitments for have not signed. So that's always important to remember, especially in lieu of what happened last cycle, late in the cycle, with 6 to 7 guys decommitting. I do not anticipate that happening this cycle, but again, it's always a possibility. You're never guaranteed to keep all of your verbal commitments, but Clemson is doing a very good job. Still got a lot of irons in the fire, and recruiting has been, and I think will continue to look up and up as the summer continues and we get into fall and players start getting on campus for games and stuff like that. I think the momentum will continue to carry for Clemson. It seems that there is a renewed focus on recruiting, and that comes from the athletic director all the way down to the coaches. So exciting times for the Clemson Tigers, exciting times for recruiting, still inside the top 5 of recruiting. Again, I think we will ultimately end up outside of the top 5, probably inside the top 10 at this point. But again, stars ratings are what they are. I'm excited about every single one of these guys that Clemson has verbal commitments from, and the guys that I think we will get verbal commitments from. So we'll continue to monitor it. We'll continue to update you guys as new things come out, and we'll go ahead and leave recruiting there.